So thanks for joining us this evening for our P6-Scrubber webinar. I'm Nicole Jardin. I'm joining you from Calgary, and I'm the founder and CEO of Emerald. Doing the heavy lifting is Sue Familia, coming to you from Wyoming, and she will actually demo the software in detail. And again, go ahead and ask any questions as you go through. So let me give you an overview of what P6-Scrubber is. So what we find is when you're, particularly if you're an owner or an owner's rep, maybe an engineering firm, you will often be receiving schedules from outside vendor, contractor, potentially engineering firm, and you're going to receive those typically in an XER or an XML format. So when you receive them, you're not quite sure maybe what the schedules are going to have in them. So you're going to import them. They might have data that you don't want in your system. Maybe there's incomplete details and so on. So these are some of the common struggles that we encounter when we're working in an environment where we're receiving schedules. So that can be quite a challenge because you have certain expectations of your P6 EPPM system. You've got standards usually in there, and you want those standards to stay nice, tidy, complete, and you don't want any problems with them. So when we import, though, we can't control out of the box. There are not that many controls on how you import them. There are some, but there are not that many. So it can kind of corrupt and pollute, I guess is a better word, your P6 and get it full of data and elements that you don't want. There could even be some colliding and clashing with what you're importing as to what is already in P6. So that's an even bigger problem. So the reason we built P6-Scrubber was we wanted to make sure that we could give our clients a better way of holding back data, doing some critiquing, and getting a good feel of what's in this schedule quickly. Okay, so we also have some clients who needed certain things, certain specifications adhered to, naming conventions and certain coding conventions and so on. And Sue will show you that when she runs through. So that was another thing that we wanted to be able to provide with P6-Scrubbers, to get those that kind of critique, that feedback in a way that's very easy to digest, easy to push back to the contractor to give them the feedback on, hey, you didn't follow the standards that were laid out in our contract, and these need to be amended. Okay, so those were some of the objectives. Because in helping many clients, different kinds of clients, we found that some of them had to have different databases to do the scrubbing in. So they'd import into a secondary database, maybe a scrubbing database or a test database, that sort of thing. Do all the cleanup every time they import, and then take that new P6 project and bring it into their production, which is also incredibly time consuming. So if you're doing imports regularly, which might be weekly, could be bi-week, every 2 weeks, it could be a month, every month, it could really add up in terms of the number of hours that you're spending in what I would call not the most productive kind of work. So these are some of the reasons that we decided, like, there's got to be a better way. So we took a lot of the smarts we already had in some of our other tools, our P6QA, P6 Loader, and we decided to build out a new tool called Scrubber. And we've been using it for several years now with different clients. So how does it work? So essentially, you have a file which you've exported, either in XER, XML, and very, very shortly also Microsoft Project. those files will essentially need to be scrubbed or reviewed and maybe scrubbed. Okay, maybe they're going to come in perfectly fine. So you basically look at the file, you bring it in, and then you tell the scrubber what you want to scrub. Okay, so not only will we scrub data that you're going to be familiar with, we also scrub some of the old kind of straggler data problems that we've had over the years. So the POBS and the risk types have been straggling along here for a while, making the files very enormous in some cases. I feel like on these versions, this last version, Primavera or Oracle, I guess, has it all cleaned up now. But if you're on an older version, you still will have some of that straggler weird data hanging around. You're able to look at calendars and, of course, all the global pieces of data, user-defined fields, codes, activity, all the codes, so activities, projects, resources, etc., and validate and or accept or reject or map, remap the different components. So Sue's going to walk through those in detail and show you some examples of a variety of things that you can do. And we also have some validations that you can introduce. So if you have naming conventions and numbering conventions, there are some things that you can do with validations on project IDs and activity IDs, so that you can get that feedback. So really the whole point of the tool is to allow you to get a XER, XML, and as I mentioned, Microsoft project shortly into your hands. Make sure it's going to come in cleanly to your system so you have no pollution of your P6. Now that's from an owner's perspective. If you're a contractor and you provide files, often what we see is kind of the reverse. So what we see is our clients who are contractors that might have resources or costs, things that they don't have to provide the owner because it's a lump sum contract. They do the opposite. So instead of scrubbing it when they get it, they want to pre-scrub it. So what they do is they copy the project and then they start removing stuff, okay, which is fine, but it's time consuming. And with some of our scrubbing utilities and our simple scrubs, you can remove all these things en masse very quickly. So depending on your perspective, you can use the tool in a slightly different way. Okay, so it's something that Sue will start to highlight, and we'll do a deep dive. So she'll actually get into the software and take a deep dive into how it works. Okay, so I'll hand it over back to Sue, and she will actually demonstrate the software. Okay, coming your way, Sue.
Okay, got it.
Okay, perfect.
So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you can see the tool in action. So P6-Scrubber can be deployed in two different ways. One is a standalone version where it is not connected to a database, and you simply just set up your rules and such, basically either from an imported file or the XER that you're working with, or you basically manually create those rules. So I'm going to be using the live version today. So essentially what I do in the live version, with the exception of looking up specific data in a database, will be the same as the standalone version. So I'm going to just go ahead and sign in. And we come to our first page here. Now, along the left side here, we have all kinds of different topics that can be handled when you are scrubbing an XER. So for instance, you have maybe your codes that you want to put in here. And you have a specific code that you want to scrub for, that you want to recognize. So first of all, I'm going to just do this first one manually. So I'm going to go ahead and enable this particular um, rule and add to it manually. So first of all, up here on most of the items here, you can scrub extra data items. So this means remove anything that you have not already defined in your code types down here below. In this case, an activity code. In order to add these, you would just click the add button and you would type in your code that you want to take a look at. You would uh, define, in this case, because it is an activity code, whether it is a global or a project. If it belonged to a project, you would put the project ID, and then you have an action, and you can either scrub it out, remove it from the file, or you can keep it. And then if you wanted to remap it in some case, you could also do that. In my case, because I am clicked in or am hooked up to P6, I can actually go out and take a look and see if there's something in there that I want to select. Now I'm going to create a new one for this example. And as you can see, it's giving me some warnings because I am attached to a database. And if I hover over this, it's going to tell me what is actually happening here. And so it's telling me it doesn't have a matching value. Now I want this value to come in to my P6 database. So what I can do is where this little light bulb is, I can click on this and I can say, yes, I do want to have that come in. And it's going to give me a star saying that I am creating this brand new for my database. Um, from there, of course, with codes, we need to start establishing our dictionary. So I just clicked a little plus sign next to my code value, and that's opening up the dictionary section for this code. So I also have the option here to remove any values that I don't have defined. And I can also start adding. So I could add manually like I did my codes, but I can also use what's called a bulk edit, and I can copy and paste into this area, either directly from my P6 database if I'm not connected, or from perhaps a spreadsheet or something of that nature. In my case, I'm going to go out to a P6 database and I'm actually going to go out and get some values here. So I'm going to go out to my activity codes and I'm going to take a look for my vendor here. I believe it starts with an SCR in this case. There we go. And of course, I need to be able to see all my values. And I'm just going to take these and I'm going to right click and I'm going to do a copy and go back into P6-Scrubber and paste them into this area here. Now, when I do this from P6, it comes across with the header. So we have the ability to remove that header so that doesn't become a value. And also we have that color um, uh, column that has come in with it. And so I can pick and choose and I can, take it off if I need to. So if you had, several pieces of or columns of information and you copied and pasted them and you wanted to remove some before you actually submitted the values, you could certainly do that. And then I can do an apply and it is going to come in and ask me basically the same thing. What do I want to do with it? Do I want to keep it? Do I want to scrub it? And in my case, I'm going to want to keep all of them. And now you'll see as I do that, it's giving me a warning again that the value can't be blank. So I need to go out here in my value and I could search if this matched in P6, or I can just simply type it in and put a description. And I'm just going to do the same as I have defined here. And then again, it's going to say, hey, this does not match P6. So I would go out and I would acknowledge that. So this would be how you would put them in manually for each one of these. So I can do that for codes. I can do that for user-defined fields. And in our user-defined fields, we have a little bit extra up here about what you want to remove. So as you know, you have subject areas where UDFs are located. And so you can pick and choose between each one of these. So let's say I don't want to have any step or issue or risks to come in. Those types of user-defined fields, I can click those and it's going to remove them all. If I wanted to keep anything that came in with activity expenses, I could keep those blank and then go ahead and define here as well. Now, an easier way to actually define whether you're doing this manually without a connection to a database, or if you are actually connected to a database, uh, is to import a file that you're actually wanting to scrub. So maybe this is the first file that you're going to scrub with P6-Scrubber. First of all, I'm just going to go and blank out my data that I put in and say I want to do it a new definition. So that's going to basically zero out everything that I've entered. Then I can go out and I
Now,
can.
but before you do that, Sue, so the
Sure.
idea that what Sue just showed you, so you're at the beginning of a project and you tell the contractor, these are the codes that we want to receive. So one of them they agreed on is vendor. So she showed you setting that up, right? So that would be preempting. But the other option, as she's about to show you, is you just get the file and then you use the file to set it up. So there's two different mechanisms and both make sense depending on where you're at in the process. So, okay, thanks, Sue.
Sure. So when I go to upload a file so that I can import it in and see what's actually in the file that I can manipulate, I import it, I go out and I browse to where my file is located and open it up and tell P6-Scrubber to import it. And it's going to go out and it's going to read this file and tell me what it's bringing back essentially. Now, when I click apply, what that's going to do is it's going to bring in all those values that are in that particular XER XML. So I'm going to start from the top now and just kind of work my way down and kind of explain a few things. First of all, Nicole alluded to the fact that sometimes you have specifications that say, okay, we want the project ID or the project name to match a certain pattern. So with our project, I'm going to do it for a project ID. You can do it for activities as well, but I'm going to enable it. And then I can say I want to, in my case, define a project ID pattern. So I would click this and it's going to say, how do you want to define that? I can do simple things like contains or starts with or ends with, or I can do a simple pattern, which is actually a little bit more robust. So if I select that, I can go in and now I can click and it's going to ask me, all right, what do you want to, whoop, click the wrong button there. What do you want to do with this? So on my simple pattern, I'm going to say I want any letter and I want them all to be uppercase. And I'm expecting to see 3 of them. And I can say apply. Well, next, what I want to do is I want to follow that by numbers. So I can go in, I can say any number, and I'm going to say I want to see 5 numbers and apply. Well, now I'm expecting a dash. So I then can go in and I can say I want some specific text here. And I can put what that specific text is. So in my case, I'm going to put a dash. And then anything that follows this is whatever. It could be letters, numbers, and it can be in any number of amount because maybe there's some clarifiers after that that are going to be unique from project to project. So then I can say any character, And if I had a finite number of characters, I could define that. And if I want any number of characters, I can put a 0 here, and that's going to just give me unlimited characters afterwards. So essentially, I've built out my specifications for my project ID. Now, I don't have anything in my test pattern here, so it's red. It's saying this doesn't match. So, whatever you have typed in here doesn't match your pattern. But what I could do is I could go in and I defined that improperly. So it's not going to work right. It should have been, no, that's right. 3 letter. Oh, I'm sorry. I put 2 letters instead of 3 letters. So essentially, I would go back and it's a good thing I could check myself, right? So letters, there's only going to be 2. So I apologize for that. And then my numbers, I'm going to have 5. And then I'm going to have my text and then any number of characters. So now when I test my pattern, I'm getting a green box. That's telling me that how I have defined this is going to work. And each time I scrub a file, it's going to check for that. Now, this is just a check. It's not going to remove anything um, from your file itself, but it's just going to validate that what you have set out and what the specifications are matching. Again, codes. This time I'm looking at my project codes. And I can see, first of all, I want to enable this. And district has a yellow triangle by it. So if when I hover over it, it's telling me that I have a dictionary validation that has failed. However, I can see that my code actually exists in my database because I'm attached to my database. Now, if I open up my codes in this case, I can see that District 5, I must not have in that code for a code value. So if I click in my map to, I can actually go in and see what my code values are. And in our case, we've actually defined it as D5 instead of District 5 or Dist 5. So I can go ahead and remap that and change everything that says DIST5 to D5 and not add to my dictionary values that just aren't necessary. In the case of my schedule here, I have, if I hover over it, it's telling me that it doesn't have a match in P6. So, and this is because I am attached, of course, to P6. So I can come in here and I can start typing, and my scroll is not working. So I need to refresh. I apologize for that. Sometimes it gets frozen up and I have to re-import my file. But there is, for the browser, occasionally it'll get frozen up and do that and show me that. So then I have my codes. So I have my type of schedule. So I can go in and let's just type schedule in here. And I actually want to make that my SCR type of schedule. So it's going to remap my type of schedule to my SCR. And then if I open up down here, I can see that my values are matching once I changed that code type name. For my user defined fields, um, I have essentially the same. I can enable this. I could decide whether I am going to scrub any additional project UDFs or WBS UDFs that come in with my file. I can decide what I'm going to do with each one of these, whether I want to keep them or whether I want to remove them from my file. So I'm just going to go ahead and scrub these. And in this case, I want to keep this, but we call this something else. So I'm going to select that one, and now I have a match. In the case of my WBS, I don't want any to come in. So I'm going to check mark WBS UDF type, and it's going to remove any WBS that comes in, WBS user-defined field that is coming in with that file. Now, quickly on activity codes, I didn't address this before. If I want to roll down an activity code from the global to the project level, what I can do is I can come over here to this roll down column and I can say that I would like to roll that down to the project level. And what that's going to do is it's going to convert this one um, code. It's going to demote it down to the project level. It's going to keep all those values intact and assigned and just make it a project activity code instead. Now let's go down and let's look at our resources because we can do some things with our resources. First of all, let's look at remapping. So I would enable that. And as I look down, I can see that I've got, these are all pretty much matching. However, what I want to do is I want to put this into a particular resource parent. So I've created a parent out there so that when I import any types of resources, I can land them underneath that parent. And what I can do is I can open this up and I can choose what parent I would like to have that go to. And it's going to go and import those into this scrubber testing parent. So that's where they're going to land when it's imported. Codes and user-defined fields work the same way. And then I also have the ability to look at my units of measure. So with units of measure, a lot of times you get files that have defined the same unit of measure that you have. However, you don't have maybe the same abbreviation or the same definition for that particular unit of measure. So I have one that's come in here and it's not finding a mapping one, but I know that I have square meters. So I can go in, again, I can do a search and as you saw, it's actually capitalized with an M and a 3. So I can remap that. And now it's telling me that I have the name is not matching. So apparently we've named this differently. Instead of M3, we have called this cubic meters. So now it matches what we have in our units of measure dictionary, and I'm not adding a bunch of additional dictionary values for that units of measure for the same type of unit of measure. In the calendar section here, when I look at my global calendars, I have the option to roll those calendars down. So when I roll those down, what they're going to do, and Nicole alluded to this before, is that sometimes you have data that's going to collide, and calendars is one of those pieces of data. So in a lot of P6 databases, they're delivered, well, in all of them, they're delivered with the standard 5-day work week. And a lot of organizations keep those um, standard 5-day work weeks, but that doesn't mean that they didn't go in and alter them, um, their definition and how they were set up. Maybe they've added some holidays or done something like that. Well, if those definitions don't specifically match what your standard 5-day work week is defined as, that imported calendar is going to overwrite your calendar of that same name. So in a lot of cases, you're most people would want to roll those down. And what that's going to do is it's going to roll them down to the project level where it's going to maintain that calendar, but it's not going to go in and collide or muddy up your own global calendars. So you can keep them separated in that respect. And if I had any other additional global calendars, I'm going to have those roll down as well. Now, in our project section here, this is just informational. We had a client who wanted to see what calendars were defined in at the project level in the XERs that they were looking at. So we added this for them so that they could see that when they imported the calendar or imported the XER into P6-Scrubber. So in some cases, what they had is they had duplicate calendars both at the global and the project level. So what I like to show here is that if that's the case, I could go and copy this. I could go back up to, oh, looks like I just crashed. Let me see if I can get back. And it looks like I'm going to have to probably re-import. Yep, I'm going to have to re-import. So as I was going through those calendars, what they could do is they could take the calendar here. They could go up into this global area, and I'm not going to rework all of these, but they could paste it and have that remap so that it actually did come in to it would be reassigned to that calendar. But yeah, I'm not going to go in and redo this and have you guys watch me. That you don't need to waste your time that way. So the last calendar piece is the resource calendar. So if you have a resource calendar that is coming in, um, defined on your resources, if you have a resource calendar that you want to remap that to, you can take that and you can um, remap it to maybe a different calendar that you want. So I'm just going to remap that to a standard 5-day resource because I have one that is the same. Now on roles, these work much like your resources. So I can find a matching one if I need to. If I want to remap it to something, I can do that. If I wanted to even put something like completely different in here, I can put something different and then just tell it that I want to bring that in as brand new. And you can tell that you've okayed that because we do put a blue star there to indicate that you've looked at that and you are going to allow that to come in. As with resources, you can also put your roles under a role tree. So I could choose the role tree that I want to put it under, and there it's going to go out and identify or define that to come in under that parent. We can also work with your cost accounts. So if you're needing to validate cost accounts, or perhaps you have cost accounts that have a different ID or something of that nature, you could remap them at this point. You could totally remove them out if you want. Um, however you would like to, however you want to define that, you have the ability to do. And then this OBS is where you can set what responsible manager you want to have reflected in that import, in that file when you import. So this is going to show you everything where you want, you know, everything where you might want to define your OBS to. So when you import it, that responsible manager is already going to be set. And then this last section here is what we call a simple scrub. If you have something that if you are doing some defining and all you do is either want to completely remove something, a code of some type, a user defined field, what have you, this is where you can do it. If you wanted to prefix them, say you wanted to bring in, all of your project codes, but you want to put an SCR in front of them, you can do that and define that. And then you can put a common separator if you like. So if you don't want to have to put, the SCR dash, the such and such dash, You just have to put the prefix, the common separator, and it's going to put that in front of your name for your project or your codes, your user-defined fields. If I choose to not have any come in, let's say I don't want any resource codes to come in, I can do that. And I'm just going to prefix my ones here. I don't want any role code types. I don't want any resource code assignment types. I can also quickly just say I want to roll down all of my calendars right here. And we also have where you could either not import or prefix user-defined fields, resources, if you have resource shifts or resource curves that are going to be coming in. Or we had a client who essentially we added this for because they didn't want any shifts or curves to come in with their XCR. So they simply just removed them. Now, once you have your all of your rules set out, all of your scrubbing rules, what you can do or what you need to do is to save that particular definition. So I would go in here and I would say save as, and I could say demo sample, and I could put notes in. And you can also determine who can see or who can use your definition. If I wanted to share it with everybody, I could make it a global definition, meaning anybody else who comes in and logs into P6-Scrubber for your organization would be able to go out and use that scrub or that definition for whatever. If you have a particular team that that is working on a project, you might want to just share it with those team members. You can define teams in the user setup, and then you can have a team that you assign them to. And then only the people who have this, in my case, the test team assigned to their user would be able to use that particular definition. So this is going to help you keep it consistent amongst your team. If everybody in your database is going to be scrubbing and using maybe for a particular client, they're always going to use a particular definition, you could make that global. But if this is just something that's personal that you're running at one time, or maybe you're the only one who handles this client, you could make it a personal definition as well. So I'm just going to save it as a personal definition, and I'm going to apply that. And oh, it's telling me that it's finding problems with my roles, and it's going to continue to do this because I had to reload every time. But essentially what it's telling me is I need to deal with these ones with the yellows on them. So it's not going to save that for me. But if I did save it, I could have it come in here, and it would then show, and then I can see this is a global definition, this is a team definition, and these are my individual definitions. So
That's kind of good because then you don't forget to get something
absolutely,
fixed up.
it
Yeah.
is definitely.
Okay.
Uh, so just for argument's sake, if I come in here and I already have a definition that's defined, I can select that definition and I can I can say load it. So what that's going to do is it's going to go out and it's going to load that definition that I have already set out there. So this is the one where I have actually made my changes and things like that. I have everything all set up and ready to scrub a XER or an XML. Now, since I have this definition applied, I can now scrub a file. So I'm going to go down before I scrub my files, and I'm going to browse to the file I want to scrub. And I'm just going to scrub the same file that we imported earlier, and I'm going to process that.
So if
And
you get an update from a contractor every week or every 2 weeks, you don't have to redo this, right?
correct, you can just load that definition and just go ahead and use it to scrub because
Okay.
you have already set out all of your rules for that particular contractor.
Okay. But they might have changed something. So do you
They
double
may
check
have.
it?
Yes, and you
Okay.
can double check it.
Okay.
So if I didn't want to scrub this right away and I wanted to check the XCR that came in, I could apply my definition. Then I could import the new XCR. And in fact, let's just do that. I could import the new XCR and let me change something on this just quickly so that it's going to come in. I'm just going to delete one. So, oh, except for I don't want to do that. Um, Let me reapply that. That's going to mess up my scrub if I change my definition. Let me just apply a different one that's going to be just totally off the wall probably. Let's do this one and see what it does. If I wanted to go out and import that same file, it's going to bring in any information from that file and it's going to tell me how many new I have, how many existing, etc. So it's going to give me an accounting of that. And so then I'm going to go and look at my new code, at my code types. So it's not this code. Let's go look in our activity codes. So I have an activity code here that is not part of my definition, and it says new. So it's telling me this came in addition to what you have already defined. So I can, from here, I could, decide what I wanted to do with it and then save the definition and, kind of keep a running list of what might be new coming in on those subsequent XERs from the same client. So this is a way that you can see easily what has been added.
Okay.
So I'm going to go back and I'm going to reload my scrubber example here, and then I'm going to go and scrub my file. So actually, we did already scrub that file. One thing I didn't note is that if you have more than one file to scrub, you can certainly highlight two at a time if you want to use the same definition on those, and you can open those up and you can go ahead and scrub them all at once if you choose to do that. So we've already run a definition on the file, and I have my results that have come up down here. The first thing you're going to want to do is take a look at the report that has been created with what has happened when the scrub was done on your file. So at the top here, it's giving me basically a general overview that I can see that some weren't changed, and can see that some were changed, and it's giving me, how many it's removing, how many it's changing, how many it's keeping. Now, if I scroll down further, I can see each individual definition, what it was set as, and these are in the gray boxes. So I'm looking at my project code uh, type and my dictionary validation for project codes. This is what it was set up. That was my definition. And then when I get down here, I have some colored boxes that are telling me what it did with each individual code type. So I can see that my client type, and my district all came in fine. My type of schedule, I decided I wanted to remove. And in the case of my district, I had a dictionary change. So here I have my district dictionary, and it's telling me what happened with those values for that dictionary. So this is where I had the DIST5 that I remapped to D5, and it's telling me it got remapped. So I can go down and I can analyze each one of these, make sure it's doing what I intended it to do when I set up my definition. And if it's not quite right, I can simply close this down, go back to my definition, tweak what needed to be fixed, and then rerun the scrub and check it again. Now, in my case, I am satisfied with what the scrub did for me. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to download my results. So when I download my results, let me take this to somewhere where I can find it easily. And I know this doesn't seem like it's easy, but for me it is. And then I can save it. So when I open this up, it comes out as a zip file. So I, of course, would have to extract it before I imported it or used the report. But I am provided with two different files. I have my clean XER in this case, which is appended by the date and time. And I also have an HTML copy of that report we just looked at. So if you were wanting to give feedback to, say, a contractor, and you wanted to use parts of that report or even that whole report to share back with them, you could send that to them, and kind of help critique what you found that was not quite as you expected in their particular file. You could also, like I said, you could copy and paste just sections of it and put it into an email or a document and send that back and give them that kind of critique on that. Um, so we're ready to import this into our database, and I have already done that in the database that I have open here. And so the project that I have highlighted is the one that's been imported. Um, and you can see that I've got some indicators that have come up as part of this file. I can see that my project ID was clean. I didn't have any changes on it. However, in the case of my project code types and my dictionaries, I did have some changes. So I had some remappings. I had uh, maybe one removed or something like that. And in the case of my dictionary value, we can see where that D5 came in instead of the dist5. It's also telling me that I had a district code in there and that it came through clean and everything was good with it. It's telling me that I had some user defined fields that were changed, either removed or maybe remapped in that case. And if I had something that was remapped um, with any of my user defined fields or codes. What also comes in is a notebook. And that notebook is going to essentially be the same as the report that we looked at after we scrubbed our file. So you can maintain that history of that scrub in case you have a concern with claims or something of that nature. You can go out and you have that accounting of what happened with that file, so that you have that history of what occurred when you scrubbed that file. Now, on the activities screen, I can go a little bit deeper and I can see that I've got some indicators telling me what has happened. In my case, in my work type, I had some that came in just as they should have. I have some that are missing, and so it's telling me, hey, you might want to look at these ones and find out why that's happening. I have some reds, meaning that something may have been removed in that case. We've got a lot of, we've got that accounting of what happened on each activity as well. In the case of the resources that were brought in, I have a specific example of just a simple scrub where I prefixed some resources and and brought those in under a particular parent in my database. So when I open that up, I'm going to be able to see that I have them all appended or prefixed with the prefix that I put in there. And this was all done with the simple scrub. I have roles that came in. I have uh, in the case of activity codes, I have some activity codes that I prefixed and things like that. So that was with that simple scrub. So easily, you can do a really fast and efficient way if you're just going to either completely remove information or if you want to prefix it. Um, so one last thing I want to address before I see if there's any questions is if you do not want to have the indicators come in, or maybe you don't want the notebook to come in, you do have that option to set that when you scrub your file. So when I go back into P6-Scrubber, I'm just going to close down my uh, task area there, and I go into my general. This is where I can set whether I want that notebook to be created or whether I want those indicators to be created. Let's say I want to keep the notebook, but I don't necessarily want to have any indicators in there. I can certainly turn that off. Now, another option we have here is if we have received an XCR file that is at a higher version than what we actually have. I can actually demote that version of this XCR. So let's say I have a 21.12 file that's come, but I only have 19.12. I can choose to override that file version and it's going to save it as a 19.12 version so that when I import it, I can import it successfully with that version number. Did I forget anything, Nicole?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
And
Do we have any questions?
I don't see any yet, but certainly if you have a question, chat it in.
Okay.
We'd like to try and make sure Sue can show it while she's still in the software. And if nothing is coming to you, I will take it back and do the wrap up. So I don't see any questions right now, Sue. So I think
Okay.
we're in good shape from there.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, let me take it back. And share the PowerPoint so we can do the wrap up. Okay, so Sue, I think hopefully you were able, oh, maybe there's a question. Oh, no, not quite. Okay, so Sue showed you the sort of things that we can scrub. We can scrub pretty much the main things that people struggle with, right? We get codes that we didn't want. We get user-defined fields we didn't want. We get calendars and whatnot. So we can scrub, we can remap, we can roll them down, we can put them under the right nodes. So all of this should be saving you a huge amount of time in P6 because you don't have to see these things come into your system and they mess up your hierarchies, which can impact on your reporting. If you've got corporate reporting off your P6, which many of our clients have, it could have a ripple effect. Things that shouldn't show up start showing up and things like that. So it's important for this. So what we find our clients giving us feedback, the ability to give a contractor feedback on their schedule, that they're missing codes, they need to clean these things up. That's a huge, huge win. Especially if you're getting the schedule in multiple times, once a month, probably at minimum. You don't want to have to deal with that over and over again. So that's a big, big win. Hopefully you saw that it's pretty easy to work with, pretty easy to bring in a schedule and it flags the things you've got to look at. So you should be able to do scrub in, especially a repeat scrub in less than 5 minutes. The first time it might take a little longer, as she showed you, because there may be quite a few things to set up. But after that, it should be much, much quicker. And the fact that you get the report out is really valuable. So the automatic flagging, the reporting really makes it much, much easier. Now, the benefit to the management team is that your system is clean. You shouldn't have so many worries about calendars colliding and changing dates and things like that can happen, which means your data is more reliable. And of course, that's the whole point of this system, is that you've got reliable, consistent data that you can work with, not only in P6, but out in any of the dashboarding and reporting that you might be doing. And that report I mentioned already, it really brings a lot of value. So we've got multiple clients using the system. They import their schedules. In some cases, we've got a client that imports over 50 schedules every few weeks. And they've got more than one user doing that. So it doesn't have to be the lead scheduler, which is often the person who does importing because there's so many things to check on. So they're able to make sure there's not a bottleneck, which is an important piece. And then secondly, they can get the report to the contractor if there's any gaps. And if you've got very detailed specifications that they've got to follow, that really goes a long way to giving that feedback that they're not adhering to the requirements. Okay, so that's a big win. And then we've got another group. It's an owner group who do the importing, and they too get numerous schedules. And prior to using Scrubber, they used to have a separate database to do all the scrubbing in. They had I think, many page document with explanations to their team on how they had to do all the different scrubbing. So this really simplifies it. And again, the whole point is to have the team working on productive, beneficial work to the project and to the company. Okay, so those are a few different examples for food for thought. So hopefully in the last hour, you saw some things that might be helpful for your team if you do a lot of importing or if you do a lot of exporting. Okay, so the example Sue showed was really an importing example, but you would do the opposite way if you're exporting. So you export the XER, you'd bring it into Scrubber, and you'd have a clean out utility component. So if you want to get rid of all the resources, if you want to get rid of all the roles, if you want to get rid of any expenses, this sort of stuff is the kind of thing that you could tackle in that approach. So this is just one of many tools that we've got set up to help you with P6. So this one is dealing with keeping the database clean, creating databases, importing data. We've got P6 loaders. That's another fantastic one to look at. If you're struggling with updating, which can often be a difficult one, we've got some updating tools that could be of interest. If you're in the turnaround space or an outage shutdown space, our TAPS tool is barcode scanning, so it's super fastest updating. And then we've got a CAPS updating tool as well, which is a tabular web-based grid. So it's very easy to get updating done by other people within the team. Okay, so that can really help with updating. We've got P6 Calculator, P6 Auditor. We've got P6 Reporter, which will let you take the data from P6, snapshot it into a warehouse, a database warehouse, and then get it out very quickly because we've built a lot of the what's called a query. We've built a lot of those extractions and matching data so that you can get an output very quickly into Power BI or Tableau or business objects or whatever tool you're using, really, because this takes the data out of the hands of just the schedulers and makes it much more usable across the team. Okay, so take a look at our webinar schedule. We've got a lot of fantastic things to help with your P6, and just let us know how we can help. Okay, so not only how we can help relate it to P6 Scrubber, if you're interested in exploring it further, you can fill out the little poll question there, and that just helps us know how we should communicate back with you. Okay, so if you want to do that, go ahead. That would be helpful for us. And then we're communicating back with you in the best manner. So we'll leave it open for questions for another minute or two. So far, I don't see any. So the tool's pretty straightforward. And if you've done any real importing and you know the kind of frustration it can bring because you get collisions or you get data that gets not lost, but it doesn't marry up with the way you wanted the data to come in. So you end up with 2 codes instead of 1, which makes it hard to report out. If you've gone through that, you understand why we've built this tool. And so go ahead and reach out after the webinar if there's something that comes to mind. And you've got Sue's information there. And I think quite a few of you might know Donna, but she can put it in the chat. And she might be closer to you in the geography because she's in the Philippines. So certainly reach out if this looks interesting, or if some of the other tools that we have in our toolkit look interesting, reach out. And certainly watch our webinar schedule, and you can learn about some of the other tools that we've put together to make your life better using P6. We've got tools for Unifier as well. So, and if you ever used contract management, we've got some tools for that too. Okay, so I think I'll stop the recording here. We'll stay on for another minute if a question comes up.